Alrighty, I asked and you delivered. This is the very first of our viewer game analysis games, and I hope that there's going to be many more. If you're interested in getting one of your games analyzed after seeing this, again, you can reach me by my email nmbtillis@gmail.com. You can also find us on the Palm Beach Chess website, and if you look below, you should be able to find other ways to contact us. Anyways, I have done viewer game analysis in the past, and I've learned, one, we're going to keep this anonymous. I'm going to tell you the relative strengths of the players based off of where they were playing, whether it be in a tournament game, Chess24, Chess.com, Lichess, etc. You got the ratings in mind, and then we're just going to go through the game and look at it. And please, 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 take into account, I am not trying to offend anyone at any point in time. We are looking at fixing mistakes and seeing other ways to play a game. So if you don't feel that you can have a critique on your game and not be offended, please don't send the game in. I had a number of years ago when the channel was new, I had a student submit a game, I analyzed it, and the opponent of the student went absolutely off on me in the comments section. And I took those videos down at the time because I really dislike toxic behavior, and most of the time I'm playing with chat turned off anywhere I'm playing anymore, because I wouldn't say by and large, but probably in 10 people who are communicating, at least half of them are going to be extremely toxic. And I just delete toxic comments on YouTube. I mean, I don't care about the algorithm and all that type of to stuff to grow the channel as fast as humanly possible. I enjoy doing this, and I want the viewers to enjoy watching as well. So every now and then I'll say something that will offend somebody, but it's definitely not my intent. So that's my introduction on viewer game analysis. If you're interested, please send in your games. I'm happy to go through them. I'm interested in mostly trying to get openings that I personally don't play. I want some different types of content, and I'm not normally an E4 player anymore. I haven't been for many years. I can play it, but choose not to. So E4 games, especially E4, E5 games. If you got some of those, send them in. We'll rip them apart. We'll have some fun with it. Okay, without further ado, let's dive right into this game. And this viewer is sending me a 3-minute game, and the rating of his rating and his opponent's rating are roughly 1,500 in one of our most popular servers. Let's say it's chess.com. And let's dive right in. We've got ourselves a Queen's Gambit Decline, and our viewer is playing black in this game. After g3, knight f6, bishop g2, and I do have a pretty decent knowledge of this position with both colors. And in my chessable book, The Aggressive Queen's Gambit Decline, I recommended going with the open Catalan, which we have in this position we're capturing on c4. And there's a lot of options here. And I wanted to emphasize one idea. The thing, or the line that I like best for black in this particular move order is going to involve bishop b4 check. But the thing is, you can't play bishop b4 check in all lines. If you think about the way that I play most of the time with white, when you've seen my Catalan games, I will actually play with a move order where d4 is not played early. And now there is no bishop b4 check, and the best option that black has is to go back into the open Catalan. So this is why I recommended it in my book, because if you want a one-size-fits-all approach to facing the Catalan, the open or the closed is the way to go, and I just passionately hate the closed. I'm just going to be honest. I think it's a difficult position for black in 99% of the variations. So getting back to our main game, here at this point, I want you to understand a quick finesse between these two moves, bishop b4 check or bishop d6. Well, bishop b4 check, it gets this reaction of bishop d2, and then we go bishop d6. And for people who enjoy the Slav, this is a easy to play position. You can look for the right moment to play dc4 and e5, and you're good. Well, there's a problem, though, with playing the immediate bishop d6 versus check and then come back. Well, knight f3, castles, and notice, after bishop b4 check initially, his bishop was actually on d2. Here, though, we have the ability to play knight d2, and this comes straight out of the first Grandmaster Repertoire Series text by Vrook. And now when we're getting in e4, it's coming with devastating effect. Well, not devastating, but black's already losing a tempo on the bishop. And you don't want to give up the bishop in the open position, so white already has a much better position. So I wanted to just showcase a few options here that black could potentially have if, after seeing the main game with one of the more aggressive options versus the Catalan, that made you uncomfortable. Okay, so our viewer played d takes c4 in the game, after which white has two major options, and in the main game, white chose one of the more aggressive options, but you could definitely go with queen check, takes, and what you need to know here is play for that quick c5, and you got yourself a roughly equal position. Thankfully, though, the opponent went for one of the more aggressive continuations. We have some fun. Knight f3, now knight c6, and after castles, this is a critical moment in understanding. And this comes from me being a French author and a Queen's Gambit author. This bishop is your bad bishop, and most of the goal that you're going to have when choosing like a d takes c4 line is how am I going to get this guy into the game effectively. And I feel like it was widely ignored by black in this game. I want to say it's like move 20 or so before this bishop sees the light of day, and it's mostly because white helped black to initiate that. When understanding that we need to get harmony in our position and use all of our pieces, especially get our bad bishop into the game, it changes up the plan a little bit. And also, we have given up the center. So if we've given up the center by playing d takes c4, you either want to try to hold on to this pawn or fix all your problems in the position by getting your bishop out. So here, bishop d6 was played in the main game, and we'll see quite quickly that this is going to be problematic for black. I do very much like, though, this move, rook b8. And it's twofold in our problem-solving approach here. So after knight c3, I'm playing b5, so I'm trying to secure my pawn investment. And then at the same time, I've gotten another avenue for my bishop to be able to actually get into the game. And we've got one of these continuations where hitting the a pawn, c5, queen c7, hitting the e pawn, and after a4, the position blows up. And this is a fun position for both players to say. Black has a pawn in hand, but white has that extra initiative. So it's the type of game that you expect if you're going to play one of these d takes c4, knight c6 lines. So back to our main game, bishop d6, and white in turn plays the simple knight c3. Much stronger is actually knight bd2. And the idea is when I capture, white has a hardcore clamp on the position. There is no e5 to get the bishop out. b6 is not going to happen because we have threats like knight f to e5 with discoveries on the rook. So how are we getting developed? It's an open position. White's going to inevitably take the center at some point. Everything seems to be going well for white. We don't want to give up the bishop. This bishop is really struggling to get out. This is what we're trying to do with white and what we're trying to avoid with black. And we've given up our extra pawn investment. So pretty much everything went wrong by this point if white finds the correct continuation. So knight c3, castles, e4, and now e5 is the threat. Our viewer definitely sees this and stops the threat to a certain degree. But it's back to this understanding the theme and the position. We need to get all of our pieces developed. So the first move that comes to mind for me is e5, because now this bishop can get out to a reasonable square, and white does have the center. He's got some initiative, so he's got just very slight pull, but you can fix your problems with e5. So that was a critical move where black could definitely get fully back into the game without many issues. Bishop b4 was played, and we have those expressions in chess like never bring your queen out early. And it's an incomplete statement because it's never bring your queen out early if she can be attacked. And it's an extension of a principle in chess of you don't want to move the same piece over and over unless you have a very good reason for doing so. In this case, it was avoiding the fork, but at the same time, well, you see, the overall plan in the position is we need to develop all of our pieces. We've got a bad bishop, fix the bad bishop. e5 is the much more superior move compared to bishop b4. And now white could also take the opportunity to play e5 himself, gain space, kick the best defender of the king side away, and your life could get more difficult. So I like this next move, bishop g5. And white's starting to get some serious initiative. And here, black must react right now. Otherwise, he's going to have a much worse position. It's an open position. In open positions, bishops are typically better. So I would put the question to his bishop to say, would you like to trade? And if he trades, our queen gets developed. Now, all we need to do is fix the problem of our bad b, and we're okay in this game. So I felt like h6 was necessary in the position. Our viewer played rook b8, and now let's get tactical. So after e5, white is definitely 100% better here, on the verge of winning. But in a practical game, especially a 3-minute game, you got to make a mess of things. So we've got to break this pin. We get in g5, and we see this sacrifice that comes up in a number of different openings in chess. Stylistically, I think the number one opening it occurs in is the Botvinnik variation of the Slav. And that line goes something like this. E6, bishop g5, dc4, e4, b5 to hold on to the pawn, e5 for the pin, h6, g5, and there is that typical sacrifice. And this is a favorite of Grandmaster Alexei Shirov, and in fact he has a full chapter on it in his Fire on the Board book, which I've recently been going through. Very, very entertaining text. Sorry, tangents, but it's important to understand pawn structures, themes, and typical sacrifices. Now, we gotta do something about that. Makes sense. Takes. Bishop h6. And here, black should probably try to make a mess of the position with queen takes d4, because if, say, queen h5, we get kind of an improved version of the game. And if bishop takes f8, we can gradually uncoil here. And though white's better, objectively, I feel this will probably provide better chances for black in the long term. Because after bishop h6, bishop g7, queen g4 was not the best move for white, but the immediate bishop takes g7, followed by queen g4, where the black king is kind of stranded, and it's difficult to see how he's going to be able to defend in the long term. And I want to say, when I was analyzing this before doing the video, that this is like a +5 or +6 position for white. and it's not immediately clear how white's just going to checkmate black, but the more you play with the engine and go deeper into the position, it's hard to see still. Bad piece, no future with this guy. Like, it's difficult to uncoil and get counterplay, whereas all white has to do is say, get this rook to here, and GG. So coming back, queen g4, queen f6, and things worked out. Black is now starting to become okay, and then we have a huge strategic issue in the position that white commits. Which is better, this bishop or this knight? And I think this was a knee-jerk reaction, and we may be getting into time trouble at this point. To be fair, it's a 3-minute game, and keep that in mind from here on out, that both players may not have had a lot of time to analyze. I would much rather see a rook to protect the pawn and keep tension in the position. But bishop takes was played, and now this guy's got some breathing room. Okay, it's like, way to help me out. I mean, I care a lot less about the triple pawns as much as my rook is now doing something. My bishop now has some options. All right, a little bit more comfortable. So rook AB1, and white's having to play some defense. And here is a critical moment where black can seriously seize the initiative, and it comes back to that theme. And over in this game, the main theme that was missed was we got to get our bad bishop in the game. That's the major takeaway here. So, rook h8 was played in the game, but let's see if you can find how to activate this bishop in the best way and get some initiative rolling. So this is a pause your video moment if you're into that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. You actually want to go with this nice pawn sacrifice with e5. And the idea is after captures, we have bishop f5, which is persuading the rook on b1 to move away from defending the b2 pawn. In turn, we're able to activate our b8 rook, capturing on b2. And maybe this bishop goes to d3 afterwards, anchors to the pawn, bone in the throat type piece. I'm liking black's position and the initiative that he's getting there. Rook h8, a little bit of a missed opportunity. So knight e4, bishop a6, looking for discoveries, and white missed a big opportunity here in playing knight c5 because get back. You don't necessarily want to go here because you're trapping your b, so bishop c8, and you're kind of admitting that bishop a6 was wrong if you have to immediately go back. Thankfully, though, white misses this with rook fe1, comes back with the rook to put pressure on the d-pawn. h4 was played. And now we have a little bit more flexibility with the rook on the d-file. And we get this mass trade down. Oh, I felt a sneeze coming on. Don't you hate when that happens? Like, I could feel it, and now I was ready, and it's gone. All right, got lucky on that one. So as the dust settles here, we have an endgame where black is now well in the driver's seat. And it's important to study, above all else, I would say, in endgames, rook and pawn endgames, or derivatives of rook and pawn endgames. And what I mean by that is, say, rook and knight versus rook and bishop, and pure rook endgames, a combination of those. It'll teach you knight versus bishop dynamics, and at the same time, rook and pawn, it's, I want to say 1 in 3 endgames in chess is rook and pawn. And that's the biggest chunk of all endgames. You need to really practice rook and pawn to be able to finesse. They have those expressions like, all rook endgames are drawn. But anyways, after rook takes c6, rook e4 was played. And black finds an excellent move working the pin here, c3. And now, here we have another critical moment, and this position goes from completely winning for black to equal right here, that quick. So, in the main game, Black decided to play c2. But timing is everything, because he was working the pin to start with. So the idea was definitely in the noggin, but again, probably time trouble here. a5 is the critical move, because White's pawn is going to fall one way or another. He can't capture because the rook's going to hang. And if he pushes, now we hit him with the in-between move. And the difference from the main game is this pawn falls, we have the extra a pawn. This is completely winning. Extra guys. c2 immediately, though, this rook is still defending the pawn. We didn't work the pin, and now this is equal. And after a5, we've given White an outside passed pawn. And when I initially saw this position, even though the engine's saying it's equal, this position makes me very nervous for Black because of the two outside passers. And let's say if the rooks come off the board, it's no calculation needed. Black is 100% losing. So we cannot trade off our last rook here, and we've got to keep tension and get counterplay any way we can. So king f6, good. Bring the king into the game, get active. And I didn't necessarily like the idea for White to just let the black king in, because the weakest part of a pawn chain is the base. And if you can make the base start falling, you're going to be in good shape. So rook a6. I probably would have kept tension with f5. And then, I mean, if he just tries to play defense, I'm clipping here. And more than likely, this should be a draw. So king takes f2, and we're able to get some pawns here. And black was worried, so e5 was played. King g4, bothering the pawn. f5. And right here is the final really critical moment of the game, because black can hold this position with proper play. And again, we're coming back to, this is not so much a study of rook and pawn in games as much as it is understanding the goal of the position or using some logic. And I mean, being where at move 40, we're guaranteed to be in time trouble at this point. So thinking about this position, white has the outside pass pawn. If my king captures, which happens in the game, white captures on f5, the black king is so far offsides, he's not going to be able to get back to help. And I believe in Silman's complete in-game course from beginner to master, when you are 5 files separated, when it's a rook pawn in a pure rook ending, it is a loss. And he goes through those types of memory markers in detail. But logically, the rook by itself is not going to be able to stop the king, rook, and pawn. King's just going to walk down, kick your rook away, queen the pawn, and you win the king and rook versus king ending. So you cannot take on h5 here, which is sadly what happened in the game. So what can we do if that ending is lost? Well, we've got to pass pawn, and pass pawns must be pushed. Let's go old school, some Nimzovich for you. So f4, king d4, and now do rooks want to be in front of pass pawns or behind them? If they're in front, it weakens the rook as the pawn gets closer. You typically want to be behind pass pawns. And now, say white, rook c8, just to emphasize some ideas, f2, and now his rook is much weaker, and the best white has here is to jettison one of the pawns, and we reach this, where the best black has, if he wants to keep the rook, is perpetual check, because white is just going to keep moving his king down to these squares, and if you ever give him a free move, he's going to queen the pawn. So this would be a draw. But in the main game, king takes h5 was played, and we'll see this technique that I was talking about. It's more than 5 files separated, and probably, yeah, this check. You didn't want to stay lateral here, because this move, he can play check immediately, and you more than likely is probably better chances going king f7. But once we allow this trade, our king can't get to an optimal square, and white is able to queen the pawn and go on for the win. Thank you for the game. Hopefully, this analysis was instructive for you, and I sincerely hope that this encourages other viewers to send in games, especially if it's in variations that I haven't played on the channel. I'd love to get more varied content to try to help more people. And since I typically don't play these d takes c4, rook b8 style systems, and my rationale is it's a little bit too risky for my taste, which may be kind of ironic to people who see me play King's Indians. It's a certain comfort zone. When you're selecting from the menu, so to speak, of chess openings, some things make me uncomfortable. Since I played those positions with white, it was one of the things that one of my trainers taught me. You never want to play against yourself when you like the opposite side of the board better. So I avoid these types of positions if I can with black. But for those that love playing these aggressive positions, I hope this was useful for you. And again, thank you, viewer, for sending in this game.